Obdike's mother also had a habit of littering the whole house with her dirty clothes and underwear, and her room gradually became a pigsty with dirty plates littered underneath her bed, breeding flies and other crawling insects in her room. Once upon a time, there lived a young couple named Ebere and Obidike. Obidike was a hard-working businessman who lived happily with his pregnant wife Ebere, who was almost due for delivery. A few weeks later, Ebere gave birth to a handsome baby boy, and Obidike's mother volunteered to come look after her grandchild. Ebere was so excited to have her mother-in-law over in a few days, as she never grew up knowing the love of a mother. All her life, she lived with her father, who single-handedly took care of her till she grew into the beautiful woman that she was. So Ebere looked forward to having her mother-in-law in her home. What she did not know was that her mother-in-law was not so easy to live with. She had developed certain terrible habits over the years that made living with her a terrible idea. Even her son Obidike was unaware of these habits, as he left his mother's home a long time ago to go live with his uncle, who taught him the ropes of his current electronics business. After a few days, Obidike's mother arrived, and his wife Ebere could not hold back her excitement as Obidike's mother stepped her foot into their home. Her eyes sparkled with joy as she embraced her son and daughter-in-law, who looked so pleased to see her. "My children, thank you for welcoming me into your home," she said, as she carried her grandson and danced around their house in joy. She looked so excited to be there as Obidike and his wife looked at each other and smiled. They were so delighted to have her around, as Ebere hoped to dip from her well of knowledge on how to cater to her baby's needs. However, things did not go as planned, as Obidike and his wife began to notice some of his mother's dirty habits, which they never knew she had. It all began on the evening of her arrival, when she was having a conversation with Obidike and his wife. She let out a loud and foul-smelling fart in their presence, as they pretended not to notice what she did and held their breath and hoped not to die. Coupled with the foul-smelling fart was the horrible odor that oozed from her mouth and body. Each word she spoke was accompanied by a wave of bad breath that made their eyes to water. Obidike's mother also had a habit of littering the whole house with her dirty clothes and underwear, and her room gradually became a pigsty with dirty plates littered underneath her bed, breeding flies and other crawling insects in her room. The stench from her room became unbearable, and her son Obidike could no longer ignore the state of his mother's living conditions. He felt ashamed and frustrated by her habits, especially as they were affecting the peace and cleanliness of his home. Even their baby cried relentlessly whenever his mother was with him, and Obidike began to worry that his mother's dirtiness might affect the health of his newborn baby. He did everything possible to make his mother see reasons with him and change her dirty ways, but nothing he did worked, as his mother continued to live her carefree life, unwilling to change. One afternoon, Obidike came home early, hoping to spend some quality time with his wife and baby. As he stepped into the house, the stench from his mother's room hit him like a wall. The entire house reeked of a terrible odor, and Obidike could see the discomfort on his wife's face as she tried to soothe their crying baby. "Mama, this cannot continue," Obidike yelled, his patience finally snapping. He stormed into his mother's room and found her laying on her bed, filled with dirty clothes and used dishes. "Obidike, my son, what is the matter?" his mother asked as she looked at him standing at the door of her filthy room. Obidike, with a harsh tone, told his mother that her dirty habits were making his house unlivable and that she had to start taking care of herself if she hoped to spend more time with them. His wife Ebere, on hearing the commotion, rushed to the room as she tried to calm her husband down. Obike took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. "I'm sorry, Mama, but you need to understand that this situation cannot continue. For the sake of the baby, for the sake of all of us, you need to change," Obike said in a calm tone as his mother looked hurt and offended. "Are you saying I am dirty, Obidike?" she asked with anger in her voice as she accused his wife Ebere of being behind her husband's attitude towards her. "I see you never wanted me in your house," she said to Ebere, who looked at her confused. Obdike's mother then told her son that she would leave the house if that was what he wanted, and his wife, sensing the gravity of the situation, decided to intervene, saying, "Mama, we are not asking you to leave. We just want to ensure that our home remains clean and healthy for everyone, especially for the baby." Obdike's mother felt insulted by Ebere's words as she walked out on them angrily and left the house. A few days later, Obdike's friends decided to pay him a visit to see his newborn baby. They arrived late in the afternoon, bearing gift items and praises. Obdike welcomed them warmly, but he couldn't help but feel anxious about how his mother might behave whilst they were around. As they all gathered in the living room, exchanging greetings and laughter, his mother came out of her room to join them. She sat on the chair, her presence instantly noticed due to her strong body odor. Obdike hoped his friends would not notice, but this was not the case as the odor began to fill the entire room. During the conversation, one of Obidike's friends named Emeka complimented the cleanliness of their home, and before Obidike could respond, a huge rat ran across the room, terrifying everyone who watched as the rat disappeared under a couch in the room. Everywhere went silent as Obidike's mother began to laugh hysterically. Before she knew what was happening, she let out a very loud and foul-smelling fart. The entire room fell silent as his friends exchanged uncomfortable glances at each other. Obdike had never been this embarrassed in his life. He watched as his friends stared at his mother in disgust and began to regret his decision to invite his mother over to care for his baby. Later that evening, after his friends had left, Obdike sat down with his mother to discuss the earlier happenings, but his mother seemed not to be interested in what he had to say. She began to accuse Obdike of conniving with his evil wife to send her out of his house, and Obdike was short of words as he knew that his wife Ebere loved his mother with all of her heart. He could not understand why his mother would blame his innocent wife for her own dirty habits and felt stuck between his mother and his wife, both of whom he loved so dearly. One fateful afternoon, whilst Ebere went to the fruit market, Obidike's mother was left to care for the baby. Despite Ebere's detailed instructions on how to keep the baby clean and safe, Obdike's mother reverted to her old habits. She fed the baby with dirty hands, leaving food stains all over his face and clothes. She then placed him on a bed covered with dirty clothes and old food wrappers. Hours later, Ebere returned home to find her baby crying uncontrollably. The sight of her baby lying in such filth made her heart to sink. She quickly picked him up and noticed that he was running a fever. Panic set in as she realized the baby might have fallen ill due to the unsanitary conditions. Obidike returned home a few minutes later to the news of his son's illness as they quickly rushed their baby to the village hospital. The local doctor, on examining the baby, confirmed that the baby had contracted a bacterial infection, which was likely due to the exposure to unclean environments. Obdike's mother, however, remained home as she sat on her filthy bed. She pondered on all that had been happening and felt terrible for allowing her dirtiness to affect her innocent grandson, who she was called on to care for. A few hours later, when Obidike and his wife returned home from the hospital, his mother asked them how the baby was, and Obidike, with a heavy heart, revealed to his mother that their baby died from the infection. His mother, numb from the revelation, stumbled backward as her hand clutched her chest. No, no, it cannot be. My grandson cannot be dead, she said as she let out a loud cry. Ebere, filled with so much pain, asked Obidike's mother what she had ever done to her to warrant all that she did to her. The reality of their words hit Obidike's mother like a sledgehammer as she sank to the floor and cried uncontrollably. I killed my grandson. I killed him with my filth, she wailed as tears poured down her eyes. For days, Obidike's mother remained inconsolable. She refused to eat, sleep, or even leave her room. The guilt was so overwhelming as she vowed to change her ways to honor the memory of her dead grandson. In the coming days, Obidike's mother cleared out her filthy room. She washed all her dirty clothes and even took a long bath. All the stench that had enveloped their home dissipated, and Obidike could not believe his eyes. His mother became so neat as she always ensured that her room was well arranged and that she took frequent showers and brushed her teeth. She became a better version of herself and apologized to Obidike and his wife for all that she put them through. As each day passed, Obidike's mother abandoned her filthy lifestyle, embracing the clean and sanitary life. One morning, while she was clearing up the plates in the kitchen, she heard a familiar sound and rushed to check what it was. Lo and behold, Obidike's mother was confronted with the sight of her grandson, who was being carried by his father. He was not only alive but healthy, and Obidike's mother could not believe her eyes. It was then that Obidike told his mother that he came up with a plan to force her to see the dangers of living such an unsanitary lifestyle. He said that although their son did not die, that such infections have the tendency of ending a child's life, so drastic measures had to be taken to bring her to the realization that being dirty is not only dangerous to her, but also to those around her. He apologized to his mother for lying, revealing that their son had been in the care of Ebere's sister, who was a nurse, and Obidike's mother, on hearing this, burst out in tears as she thanked Obidike and his wife for making her see the errors in her ways. She promised to change, saying that she would never put her family at risk again, and from that day forward, Obidike's mother became meticulous about her hygiene. She bathed regularly, kept her room clean, and ensured that the baby's environment was always sanitary. The lesson to be learned from this story is that cleanliness is next to godliness. Every decision we take in life has its consequences, so we should be wary not to make choices that could harm ourselves or those we love. Living a clean and healthy lifestyle is not just about appearance, it is about ensuring the safety and well-being of everyone around us. Finally, the story teaches us that it is never too late to change. No matter how old or set in our ways we might be, with the right motivation and support, anyone can improve and become a better version of themselves. Obidike's mother's transformation shows that with determination and the right support, positive change is always possible. I hope you enjoyed the story. Like, subscribe and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.